On a barrier island off the coast of Texas, the coyotes did not look right. They were too tall, too long in the leg, too red in the coat. Closer to the size of a Great Dane than to the lean gray dog most people picture. For years, everyone who lived there had a name for them. Coyotes. Odd ones, maybe, but coyotes. One resident could not leave it there. When the animals turned up dead on the island's roads, he started collecting them, scraping tissue from roadkill on the shoulder of the highway, because something about them refused to add up. He was not a scientist with a grant. He was a wildlife photographer who had been turned away by one agency after another. So he did the only thing left. He put the samples in the mail, sent them to a geneticist at Princeton who agreed to read them when no one else would, and waited. What the lab found in the blood of 2 dead Texas coyotes was the genetic signature of an animal the United States government had formally declared gone from the wild in 1980. It should have meant nothing. It was 2 road-killed dogs on an island nobody was watching. Except it did not stay 2. The animal in that signal was the red wolf, Canis rufus, North America's own native wolf, a predator that once ranged across the entire southeastern United States, and that the record had closed the book on decades earlier. The 2 Galveston animals carried roughly 30% red wolf ancestry, not a trace, not contamination. Nearly a third of their genome belonged to a wolf that, on paper, had no living wild population left to inherit from. And it was not the island's secret alone. When other labs went looking along the same coast, in the marshes of southwestern Louisiana, they found the same ghost in more than half the wild canids they tested, running in some animals from 38 to 62%. So the real question was never the one you would expect. Not whether the red wolf was still out there, walking around whole. It plainly was not. The harder question is this: if an animal can be declared extinct in the wild, and its blood keeps crossing a Texas road at night for the next 40 years, what exactly were we measuring when we decided it was gone? To feel the weight of that question, you have to go back to the verdict. By the middle of the 20th century, the red wolf was nearly finished. 2 centuries of bounty programs, poisoning and trapping had been aimed at every large predator on the continent, and the forests the wolf needed were cut down around it. By the late 1960s, the entire species had been squeezed to a last damp remnant along the Gulf Coast, in the cane brakes and marshes of southeastern Texas and southwestern Louisiana. So the United States Fish and Wildlife Service made a hard decision. Between 1973 and 1980, working under the brand new Endangered Species Act, biologists went into that last country and captured roughly 400 wild canids. They measured skulls, x-rayed bone, analyzed howls, trying to sort a true red wolf from a coyote and from the growing number of animals that were already a blend of the 2. Out of all 400, after the doubtful ones were set aside and the pairs that would not breed were counted out, just 14 animals were judged pure enough to found a captive program. 14. That was the entire genetic future of the species. And in 1980, with the last of them pulled from the marsh, the government declared the red wolf extinct in the wild. Hold on to the exact words, because they matter for everything that follows. Not extinct, extinct in the wild. The species did not blink out. 14 wolves and their descendants lived on in a breeding center in Tacoma, Washington, and in 1987, their offspring were released into a refuge in North Carolina, the first time this country ever tried to put back an animal it had already declared gone from the wild. The red wolf was rare, managed, and hanging on. But the wild wolf of the Gulf Coast, the one those 400 captures had emptied out of the marsh, that one the record now counted as a closed chapter. That sounds impossible. A lost animal hiding in plain sight while carrying the very diversity we thought we had lost? It has happened before, and recently. Half a world away from Texas, in the highlands of New Guinea, there is a wild dog called the singing dog, named for the strange modulated howl it gives. For decades, it was thought to survive only in zoos, a few hundred captive animals descended from a single handful of founders, so inbred that biologists assumed the wild ones were simply gone. Then, in 2016, an expedition photographed 15 of them alive in the Puncak Mandala Highlands. And when researchers sequenced their DNA in 2020, the finding turned the story inside out. The wild dogs were not a fated remnant of the zoo animals. They were the source, and they still carried the genetic richness the captive population had long ago bred away. Hold that shape in your mind. A wild population quietly keeping what the protected one had lost. Because it is exactly what was waiting on a barrier island in the Gulf of Mexico. Which brings us back to the island, and to the one man who would not round the animals down to coyote. His name is Ron Wooten, a wildlife biologist and photographer who has lived on Galveston for years, watching these animals thread between the dunes and the beach houses on a coastline that was steadily filling up with both. He began paying real attention around 2008, after one of the island's canids killed his dog. And the more he photographed them, the less they matched the field guide. They were leggier, redder, heavier in the head. He took his suspicion to agencies, and one after another, they were not interested. So he found a geneticist who was, Bridget von Holt at Princeton. And von Holt had a complicated reason to care, because she had already spent years arguing, in print, that the red wolf might not be a truly distinct species at all, a doubt we will have to come back to. He started mailing her what the island gave him, tissue from animals killed on the road. When one sample was lost in transit, he mailed the lab the actual scalpel he had used to cut it, still carrying enough material to test. Researchers there said they had never seen anything like it. What the lab did next is the spine of this whole story. In 2018, von Holt's team, with the lead researcher Elizabeth Heppenheimer, published their analysis in the journal Genes. From just 2 road-killed Galveston animals, read across more than 7,000 points in the genome, they estimated that both carried substantial red wolf ancestry, on the order of 30%. Heppenheimer put the stakes plainly. It is incredibly rare, she said, to rediscover animals in a place where they were thought to be extinct. And red wolves had been declared gone from that region more than 35 years earlier. 2 road-killed dogs could have been a fluke. They were not. By 2022, a larger study had sampled 50 individual coyotes on Galveston itself, and found nearly half of them carrying more than 10% red wolf ancestry, organized into at least 4 family groups: healthy, breeding, and holding 5 genetic variants found in no other population on record, along with a red wolf maternal line. Across the water in Louisiana, a separate team read 31 wild coyotes and found red wolf ancestry running as high as 62%. The evidence did not shrink under scrutiny. It grew, animal by animal, parish by parish, until the ghost was not a rumor about 2 dead dogs. It was a living population that had been walking the Gulf Coast the entire time the record said the wild red wolf was gone. Here is the part that does not look like an extinction. because the wolf never fully disappeared. It dissolved into something else. As the red wolf's numbers crashed through the middle of the last century, the survivors faced a problem simpler and crueler than any trap. They could not find each other. And into that same emptying Gulf Coast came the coyote, expanding eastward, plentiful where the wolf was vanishing. A red wolf that cannot find a red wolf will breed with a coyote. That interbreeding was one of the final blows that erased the pure wild wolf. It was also, quietly, the thing that saved its genes. Geneticists have a name for what the lab found on Galveston: ghost alleles. A ghost allele is a piece of DNA that has vanished from the official, recognized version of a species, but survives, hidden, inside a different living population that the two once interbred with. And the red wolf produced the perfect conditions for it. The rescued wild wolves became 14 founders in a breeding program, and a group that small, bred within itself for decades, steadily loses genetic variety through simple bad luck of inheritance. The coyotes of Texas and Louisiana carried no such bottleneck. So variation that was quietly draining out of the captive red wolf, the safeguarded, pedigreed, official red wolf, had been sitting the whole time in the blood of the animal everyone drove past. The species did not only get hunted and cleared and declared gone. Part of it walked off the reservation of its own extinction, wearing a coyote's coat, and kept its inheritance alive in the one lineage no one thought to protect. If you follow this channel, you will meet this moment again and again, the one where the easy answer and the hard answer both turn out to be true. And this story has a genuinely difficult version of it, so give the skeptic the floor. Fine, the skeptic says. You found red wolf DNA in some coyotes, but was the red wolf ever really its own animal to begin with? Maybe it was never an ancient, separate species at all. Maybe it was always just a blend of the gray wolf and the coyote, and all you have found is more blending. It is a serious objection, and the honest part of the answer is that it comes from strong company. In 2016, a whole genome study argued that the red wolf and its cousin, the eastern wolf, are not deep, ancient lineages at all, but relatively recent mixtures of gray wolf and coyote. The uncomfortable, fascinating detail is who led that study. Bridget von Holt, the same scientist whose lab would, 2 years later, deliver the ghost allele discovery. The researcher who most seriously questioned whether the red wolf was a true species is also the one who proved its genes had survived. A formal rebuttal in 2017 argued the data pointed the other way, toward genuine distinctness. In 2019, the National Academies of Sciences reviewed the whole fight and concluded the red wolf does form a valid species, while allowing that it may be a historically admixed one. The argument is not fully settled, and this video will not pretend to settle it. But notice what the taxonomy fight does not touch. Whatever label you give the red wolf, distinct species or ancient hybrid, the genetic material the captive program has been losing is demonstrably, measurably still out there in the wild, in the coyotes of the Gulf Coast. And the scientists who found it now argue those animals could be a reservoir to rescue the very population we spent 50 years and 14 founders trying to save. That is a proposal, not yet a rescue. The ghost wolves have not restored anything yet, and they are running out of the one thing the discovery assumed they had: time. Because the discovery did not pause the island, that coastline Wooten watched filling in has kept filling. The stretch of Galveston with the densest concentration of ghost wolves the group researchers call the East Beach Pack, sits on exactly the kind of open coast that developers want, and plans for a large beachfront resort have been drawn over the same dunes the animals den in. Every road and lot that goes down cuts the habitat a little smaller. The ghost wolves survived 2 centuries of bounties, the near total collapse of their own species, and 40 years of being filed under coyote. Whether they survive the next zoning permit is a question no one has answered yet. We are, it turns out, still entirely capable of losing the red wolf a second time, in the exact place it managed to hide the first. So go back to that road on Galveston Island, in the dark, to the animal in the headlights that everyone but one man was content to call a coyote. Every fact in this story since has been an argument about what was actually crossing that road. The record looked at 1980 and said the wild red wolf line, as it stood, was finished, emptied out of the marsh and carried off into a breeding pen. And on its own terms, the record was right. The people who kept insisting the island's strange red dogs were something more looked at the same animals and said, "It is still here. It never fully left." And the DNA says they were right too. Both were true at once, which is the thing the word extinct was never built to hold. A species can be gone from the wild and still be riding through the night inside the body of its own replacement. We did not lose the red wolf the way we thought we did, cleanly, on a date with a signature. We lost the pure animal and kept its ghost, in the last place anyone with a clipboard was looking. Some animals are not lost. They are only disbelieved. And the record has never once been able to tell disbelieved apart from absent. The paperwork still says the wild red wolf of the Gulf Coast went extinct in 1980. Out on a Texas barrier island, something with a third of that wolf in its blood is raising pups in the dune grass, and it has never read the paperwork. For 40 years, the one man who said those animals were more than coyotes was told he was seeing things. He was not seeing things. He was reading the only copy of the red wolf the wild had managed to keep.